Hey there, this is Nerius, and today we will be discussing the NPC question from the esoteric perspective, or in other words, what is considered to be aware and not aware based on the esoteric perspective. So, first of all, let's quickly talk about what is considered an NPC, this whole meme that is going on. An NPC, based on it's basically a meme of sorts, means that a person who is not having an internal dialogue. That's the most simple way of saying it. In other words, it's the sheeple, right? The people who are completely under control based on different stimuli from the external world. However, the way that this topic is portrayed in social media and people talking about it, I feel that it fundamentally lacks an esoteric perspective, which I think brings a lot of light to it. Because first of all, the esoteric meaning of a lack of internal dialogue is not necessarily bad. So this misunderstanding comes from the idea that people who are not initiated, so to speak, into esoteric ideas, they think that their intellect is the supreme powerhouse, so to speak. Not everyone, but there is this misconception that an NPC, a person who's, so to speak, a sheep in his life, in his situations, he is so because he lacks a certain higher intellectual understanding and activity. Now that's actually incorrect, because from the esoteric perspective, intellect is not the primal, the most highest of the highest of available things. And most importantly, intellect is not awareness per se, so to speak. It's not consciousness. It's just a tool to be used in various ways, but it's not you itself. Therefore, it cannot be that because of a lack of an intellect or intellectual activity only that you become an NPC, so to speak. The definition of becoming an NPC or being an NPC in esoteric terms is actually way more all-encompassing and way more deeper, because what it fundamentally means is that you are a person who is pretty much mechanical in their nature. An NPC is mechanical in its nature. Now, what does that mean? Mechanical means that it's under certain cycles and laws which he or she can't influence. So in other words, because of his nature and nurture, right? Because of how he is born, because of his character, and because of the characteristics and outside forces that influenced him, he acts and he is what it is based on these situations. So with this definition, you can probably understand that it doesn't matter if you have an IQ of 200, you could still be the biggest NPC out there, because it's not the intellectual quality that counts. It's the ability to have a certain will, a certain ability to do things instead of just reacting in a way to things. And that's what differentiates the mundane explanation of NPC and the more esoteric explanation of the NPC. And when I think about it, at least in my opinion, it certainly makes a lot more sense, because the general way of describing it is pretty superficial. So, as we described, from the esoteric perspective, intellect is not something that defines that. Now, let's analyze this a bit deeper. Let's imagine you have an individual, right, which is a spot on the plane, and let's imagine that more awareness, more consciousness goes up and less goes down. So at a certain point, you have that individual. Now, that individual is bound, so to speak, in his place by certain cycles that he is in, right? This is his nature and nurture. So let's discuss what kind of process, at least theoretically, he would have to go through to actually rise above and become more of a cause than only an effect in his experience, and lose the title of an NPC and gain the title, so to speak, of an actual individual. From the esoteric perspective, you gain the title of an actual individual when you are able to turn the circular cycles that you are into spirals which can go up. You can turn it into spirals by, it's very interesting this point, by changing your identification point. The thing is this, from the esoteric perspective, an average random person doesn't have much self-awareness. Everybody thinks they have self-awareness. If you actually start looking into these matters, you understand that that's actually not the case, that self-awareness is actually very rare. And even though this basic self-awareness, kind of that I am, is at least somewhat common, the awareness of you being aware, which to, if you're not into esoteric things, this might seem completely ridiculous, but there is some truth to that, but you really have to consider it and contemplate that. The awareness of being aware is even a higher level of awareness, which actually differentiates you, and it actually, the thing which is functional about it is that it unhinges you from identifying with your nature and nurture, basically. And what that means is that you kind of rise above that plane, so to speak, and you're no longer as bound to these things as you were. This is where an actual ability to do is realized, because before you only do in accordance to the stimuli that you were given by nurture or nature, by the way that you were born or the things that surround you. And the only way to change that is to change your perspective so that you are not bound in this limited identity. This is why you can see a lot of esoteric or spiritual doctrines which use all kinds of words that kind of describe unity with the all, with the universe, or whatever. These metaphors are there to guide you towards an understanding that you can actually identify with a bigger thing than your limited little self. And that is what makes the difference, and that what actually makes you an individual and not an NPC. So it's an interesting topic, this NPC thing. It's actually a pretty esoteric topic, even though it's talked a lot about in more mundane circles. So I don't know, what do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and until next time.